it's a priority. So
Yes.
Now
We need to handle
deal
this
with that.
now. Yes.
Good. So talk about some of the types of presentations that people come in with. I'm always interested because, you know, people think of chiropractors as treating bad backs or headaches and aches and pains, but I know you see a great variety of patients that are coming in for a lot of different reasons. What are some of the conditions that people come to you for, and how do you help them?
So with homeopathy, you can treat everything from bumps and bruises. You smashed your finger in a car door to I got a bee sting today, I'm having an allergic reaction, to I have an earache, a bladder infection, or some other immune deficiency. So it really gives me the gamut. So I have the privilege of taking care of people from the littlest things to some of the larger things. And because homeopathy is actually a very natural medicine, and the way that it's produced pharmaceutically, it's non-interactive with drugs. And so, for example, someone comes in with asthma, I don't have to worry about giving them a homeopathic medicine for a cough because I'm not going to interact with their medicines that they're taking.
I see.
So homeopathy becomes a really valuable tool when someone, for example, has an allergy to an antibiotic and they can't use an antibiotic. How else can we help them? We can offer nutrition, we can use a homeopathic medicine instead of an antibiotic. So
what I'm hearing you say is that the homeopathic remedies are not going to preclude people from taking something that they may already depend on, if their life depends on it, or they're used to taking, but might mean that they don't have to take as much, or
right, or as long, or the side effects of what they're taking are not as great.
Right.
So
they can monitor themselves that way.
Yes, yes.
That's fascinating.
The belief behind homeopathy is that one should be healthier at the end of treatment, not more disabled or weakened by the treatment.
Yeah, which often happens when we're taking medications. We know
Yes.
antibiotics, you mentioned that as an example. People who take antibiotics typically helps the body fight the infection, but the body is left weaker
Yes.
as a result of that.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah. So the homeopathic, you tell me whether this is correct. If a person is taking antibiotics, let's say for a bladder infection,
Yes.
and they use the homeopathy with that, the hope would be that at the end of that infection they wouldn't or they'd be less likely to have reinfection or recurrence.
Correct. And oftentimes I can use homeopathy, for example, in that circumstance with a bladder infection by, with that and a probiotic, we end up with them not, because we break the cycle of a bladder infection that continues to return.
Because that is common.
It's very common.
They tend to reoccur.
Yes.
And that helps to break that cycle so that
Yes.
they can
move on with their lives. Yeah. In a healthier way.
in a healthier way, right. Fantastic. We were talking before the program a little bit about some other things that people come in with, and,
Yes.
can you, well, you brought some things, and this is why I wanted to talk about that. So tell me what you brought with you.
Well, because this is the beginning onset of the cold and flu season, as we're all well aware, and I'm certainly seeing it in the office, I brought a vial of oscillococcinum. And the reason I brought this little product, number one, it's a wonderful preventive. You can take it on a daily basis. And as I said before, it doesn't interact with any kind of medication. So children and folks who are out in public a lot, especially teachers and people who are in contact with the public, this is a wonderful way to prevent. It is, my patients come in and they go, should I get some of that stuff?
I was just going to say, what's the name of that again?
It is a very difficult word. You actually have to break it down into little chunks, but it's oscillococcinum. And you see it at Whole Foods and at Nugget and at our local health food stores. Mm-hmm. It's a white packet with orange and yellow stripes on it, and everybody goes, what is that? Well, that is for the symptoms of flu. And you can take it preventively, but you can also take it if you've come down with the flu, with a cold or flu-like symptoms.
You start getting those prodromal, what's
yes,
happening?
I'm
and
coming
you can,
down, grab a bottle and take it, because it also, not only does it help prevent, but it will also shorten the symptoms of the flu, which is a wonderful thing. We don't like to be sick. And so actually I'm already seeing, so I use this actually in combination with, if you've already developed the flu, for example, I had a call this week with vomiting and diarrhea. Then I also gave the appropriate homeopathic similar for that vomiting and diarrhea, but we use this in the rest of the family so nobody else got it.
Good point. Good
So,
point. Would a person take this several times during their illness, or several times a day?
several times a day. I generally say, people's discouragement with homeopathy is that we can only buy very low potency in the health food stores.
Right.
And the key to making a homeopathic medicine work successfully is repeated doses and that low potency. So I often say every 2 to 4 hours, or as the symptoms demand. So for example, with poison oak, when someone has a terrible itch, they may put homeopathic pellet in their water and sip on it every 10 to 15 minutes to manage the itch.
Oh.
So that works really well.
What is the other vial that you brought?
Actually, it's calendula, believe it or not.
Good healing
and
herb?
it's a very good healing herb, and it's used for cuts and abrasions. And you can take it internally as a homeopathic preparation, but you can also do it externally as a topical treatment for abrasions.
Right. You can hit it from both sides and help the body heal itself faster.
Yes, and I use it on animals, and I oftentimes will I've had mules and horses where they've cut their lip, and we'll just take the pellets and we'll pop it in their water, out of the sun, in their water, and they will be drinking the water throughout the day and getting their homeopathic remedy, and then the cut heals and there's no scarring or sign of a cut. I mean, that's how well it mends.
Great recipe there. I like that remedy. You had mentioned something about potencies and the different potencies. Now, I notice when I go to the health food store or I buy homeopathy pellets, there is a certain number followed by an X or C's, those kind of things.
Yes.
What is the significance of that, and what should we look for when we're...
It's a great question. So homeopathic remedies are made from herbal tinctures. So they start out in crude form as a tincture. So you can actually go in and buy herbal tinctures at the health food store. Then the tincture, that mother tincture, is actually diluted and shaken very vigorously. And the number denotes the percentage of a remedy to water, distilled water. So an X, so if you see your little vial and it says 6X, that means that 1 drop of that original tincture was diluted in 9 parts of distilled water, shaken vigorously, and that process, that's a 1X, is repeated. They take a drop from the 1X, they put it in another 9 parts of distilled water, shake it vigorously, and that becomes a 2X. Most commonly, you will see 6, 12, and 30. The really wonderful thing about a homeopathic remedy or medicine is that at 24X, you've diluted out all of the original chemical substance. And there's a technical term for that. It's called Avogadro's number. And that is why it's so safe and not interactive with our Western medicines, because at a 30X, for example, there is no chemistry to that. So they use things like arsenic and mercury and lead and spider venoms and venoms from snakes, those types of things like lachesis. And
now, are those considered, when you get past 24X, are those high?
Those are considered high potency.
potency.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you see a C on the end, it's that same process. It's dilution succession, starting with 1 drop of the mother tincture, but it's done in 99 parts, and that's called a centesimal potency. And that Avogadro's number is actually reached at 12 dilutions. So it's a 24X or a 12C that you are. And the theory behind the succession or the shaking is that it actually increases the potency. So water is literally taking the healing properties, mirroring the healing properties of whatever was put into it, and then transmitting it to your body.
Wow. Do you have any idea about how that occurs or what's happening there? Maybe the physics of it or the energetics of it?
The physics are fascinating, and I think we are finally coming into an age where physics provide us more answers on homeopathy than there ever have been in past. We have clinical results that are undeniable, but the physics are now beginning to be apparent, we are able to document that.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And basically, what Hahnemann discovered was that a crude substance literally creates the same set of symptoms in a healthy body that it can now treat in a diseased body. And a perfect example of that is ipecac. If you are vomiting violently, you would use ipecac to stop the violent vomiting, correct? So like if you poisoned yourself, they suggest ipecac as a treatment.
Yeah.
Well, ipecac, if you take ipecac, it will cause violent vomiting.
Right.
So basically, you're stimulating your own response to addressing that. And I think we've talked about this before, where it's sort of almost like lighting a backfire, like a fireman would light a backfire. Mm-hmm. It burns the fuel, and it stimulates or activates your own body's correct response to the circumstance.
Well, I haven't really looked into this too much, so I don't know, but is there any study, since there's so much in energy medicine now, the study of wavelengths and vibration and those kind of things, does that theory abound in homeopathy as far as vibration?
It does, because every single living substance has a frequency.
Right.
So the wonderful thing about homeopathy is that it heals from above down, inside out.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it is actually, our frequency changes as with a change of state, for example. So if you have the flu, your frequency has changed. And it makes sense that what homeopathy does, that substance has a frequency, and it's really stimulating that frequency within yours. So it's starting from the outside and coming internally. So yes, there is a direct correlation between frequency of the plant and the frequency of the human circumstance.
That explanation resonates with me, speaking of that. Well, if we've gotten too ethereal for our audience, just so you know, MRI picks up vibrations from atoms. So then it turns that into a picture that we see in different densities. So we're not talking ethereal medicine. This is actually things that can be measured now. And so homeopathy has been used for, if my math is right, 3,000 or 4,000 years.
Well, actually, homeopathy has been a science since 1790.
Okay, so that's several hundred years.
Several hundred years.
And so it has a track record of working. I don't think if it didn't work, it wouldn't be around.
It would not be around. That's correct.
And I've heard that it was the Queen's preferred choice of
yes, it is.
medicines.
It's practiced all over Europe.
England, we're talking.
England, Germany, and France. There are still homeopathic hospitals in London, and their medicine. You go into a homeopathic medicine, and you are covered under their national health program, which is wonderful.
Wow.
It's practiced in India. In fact, in India, medical doctors go to school together for the first 4 years, and then they separate at the 5th year, and you either become a homeopath or a surgeon.
Huh.
So it's considered the same medical doctor, whether you're a homeopath or a surgeon.
You can either help people get healthy or treat them after they've had disease, but...
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, speaking of that, I'm looking at a book that I see on the table here, and I think you might know something about that book. Could you tell us a little bit about that and its origins?
Well, I have been teaching homeopathic care treatment since about 1985, and my students, if you will, always said, we need a manual to take home. So what I did was I created First Aid and Beyond, which is a homeopathic handbook for people to use, and it's designed for so simple that my children have used it, which is great, but there's enough information for an adult to make adequate decisions on how best, the big questions are, how often do I give a remedy? When do I know when to stop? What is the right remedy? And homeopathy can be a little complicated, but first aid is a great place to get your feet wet into
So this
it.
is all first aid, having to do with bee
Yes.
stings and poison oak and scrapes and bruises.
And bumps, and what I've done is I took the Red Cross first aid information so that you understand that you don't just do homeopathy. You know, if you've got a broken arm, you need to take it and manage the
Not
broken
just
arm.
the calendula, but
Right, exactly.
a cast might be helpful.
A cast might be helpful, but
Yeah.
it offers people a real simple explanation on how to handle that smashed finger in the door,
Oh yeah.
how to get a fish hook out.
I know I can't recall the brand, but there was what's called a kids kit that used to be for sale.
Yes, Highland built,
Highland, yeah.
Built that. Yes, all homeopathic remedies are made in pharmacies, and there were 3 pharmacies in California. I think we're down to 1, but Highlands was one of the pharmacies. Borean is another.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them. So they had a kids kit, and I recall using it, being very simple. You know, is there a cough? Yes. Then the next question is it a wet cough or a dry cough? Well, you know what the difference is.
Yes.
Is there a fever? Yes or no? And so you could just go down. Well, they've got 8 out of the 10 on this one and only 3 out of the 10 on this one, so this was the right remedy. And it worked. It worked very well, very simple to follow. And I'm sure
Yes.
your book is
That simple.
that simple.
Yes, that simple. Little bites, so you don't have to be an expert to use it and feel comfortable with it.
And you don't have to worry about overdosing or giving them
No.
the wrong remedy.
No, that's the other thing, because we're not working with chemicals in the true form.
Right.
We're not. If you give the wrong remedy, nothing happens. You
That's
don't get
the worst
better.
that can happen is nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't get better, but you also don't get worse. So, but if you give the right remedy, the symptoms are greatly reduced, and I really see that in things like poison oak, for example, because within a few hours the itching stops, and then you'll see the rash dry up, and it's just a wonderful.
Well, we were talking a little earlier about nutrition, and I was wondering, with the environment as it is, you know, we hear every day about our food chain is more and more heavy metals. We have PCBs. Everybody on the planet has, you know, these toxins in their body. What do you see as the future of health and healing, as far as what we're seeing environmentally now within ourselves as well as outside of ourselves? How can we take care of ourselves better with what you know?
That's a great question, and the most important thing that I think people should understand is because of the environment being as toxic as it is, we cannot avoid that toxicity. So the most important thing that we can do personally is to manage our own physical being, and in doing so, eating organic so that we avoid pesticides as much as possible, drinking adequate amounts of water so that we keep the systems flushed, that kind of thing. Taking good health nutrition, because even though we have organic foods, the soils are still quite deplete from years of farming practices. And so even though we're eating organic, we may not be getting enough of the nutrients that we need in order to stay healthy. So basic principles really still apply. Good sanitation, good nutrition, good supplementation, and an adequate amount of water. And of course, things like rest, exercise, and nature.
Help the body get rid of its own waste. And
That's exactly right.
is there do you do testing for any of the nutritional deficiencies
Yes.
and those kind of things?
That's the most exciting thing about where we are in medicine right now. There are so many tests available. You can test for food sensitivities and environmental sensitivities. You can test the gut to find out if it's processing foods correctly, or if you have an overgrowth of something that doesn't belong in the gut. And I had an example of a woman who was allergic to everything she ate and had this horrible runny nose. She couldn't leave the house because she was just pouring nose.
The body was saying,
I
get
can't-
rid of something.
And she'd tried everything, and so finally we ran a gut panel and discovered that even though she had been treated for H. pylori 7 years earlier, they didn't do a follow-up test, and she still had H. pylori in her intestinal tract. So then we were able to she was able to go get the correct antibiotic to get rid of the bacteria and then do the rebuilding of the gut post the antibiotics. So they also have tests for vitamins, so you can test the levels in your body to know if you're deficient in B12 or in B6 or folic acid, those types of things. So all of that documentation, so you can test your body. You don't have to guess any longer.
Right. It does take the guesswork out, which saves people money. So
Yes,
it
it
may
does.
cost a little bit of money to find these things out, but in the long run, it will be much more cost effective. I know I was just reading today about some genetic testing.
Yes.
They're done. The sequencing can tell you a lot about your metabolic type and your
Yes.
how you process your foods and your what type of exercise you should be doing. I mean, this is really a fascinating time.
Yes.
And certainly one that natural health practitioners would be should be taking the reins, because this genetic information needs to get out to help people stay healthy, rather
Yes.
than react and say, well, you should cut off your breasts simply because you have this gene, or
Right.
something like that. So
Right.
you want to make sure that we're helping enhance health rather than waiting for a reactive stance.
That's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anything else that you wanted to leave with us today, as far as more first aid information we haven't covered? Or?
Well, just to give homeopathy an opportunity, if you're working with, especially in the season of viruses, because there really aren't any Western medicines that efficiently deal with a virus, homeopathy is the perfect approach to treating. It reduces symptoms or prevents completely. And to know that there are wonderful homeopaths in our area besides myself, and they can help guide you. There's a ton of information online in research, and if you don't succeed the first time, try again,
Yeah.
because either you didn't have the right remedy or you didn't repeat often enough. Those are the two most common pitfalls in homeopathic treatment.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like people could try homeopathy with whatever else they're doing to
Yes.
help enhance the experience. And certainly, if not, I mean, if it didn't do anything dramatic, at least it helps you be healthier at the end of a typical treatment,
Yes.
so that you would be less likely to have more problems.
Exactly.
Well, how do people get in touch with you? I know that at the end of our program we're going to have emails and websites and all that, but tell us, just for those who are listening.
Well, I'm local in Auburn. My office, it's overlooking the canyon, which is a wonderful way to practice every day, and talk about bringing health into my office. And I'm also, I have a beautiful website called naturalmedicine.com.
Naturalmedicine.com.
Natural medicine.
Spelled out, okay.
Yep, one word. I've been it's been a website since 1992. There's a ton of information. If you have a question, you can email me a question. We have experts on the panel that answer questions on herbs and acupuncture and counselors and finance. It's kind of fun. So if you have a question on anything to do with your health, whether it's financial health or physical health, we have people who can answer questions.
You may be swamped now.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, thank you
We
so
hope.
much for coming and sharing with us today. It was a wealth of information, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has learned a lot as well. Thank you so much again, and feel free, please, to contact Dr. Lanzarata for any other questions that you might have. Thank you again. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.